Every day we coexist with evil. We witness the darkest side of human behavior. The suffering caused by one individual to others is something inherent in our society. As dedicated investigators of the criminal world, we're on a mission to uncover the most shocking crimes and get inside the minds of those who commit them. I am Lucas, and today I bring you another unreal true crime. Tair Rada's story. Tair Rada was the pride and joy of Shemuel and Ilana Rada, inhabitants of the peaceful Katzrin, a short distance from Haifa in Israel. She grew up with her older siblings, Roy and Ohad, who were always watchful and caring towards her. Tair's vivacious spirit, love for the arts, and talent in dance made her stand out. Her friends fondly referred to her as their guiding star. Naturally, Tair's charisma meant she led and others were inclined to follow. Though her beauty and wit sometimes brewed jealousy among other young girls, any rifts were generally short-lived since many of these girls had been friends from childhood. Tair's daily life included attending a local high school, and like many kids in her neighborhood, she preferred walking to school. It was her routine to call her mother upon reaching home, a reassuring habit for the family. However, on the fateful day of December 6, 2006, things took a turn. Skipping her last class to mingle with her friends, Tair was her usual self, blending in and enjoying the camaraderie. Around 1:20 p.m., she got really thirsty, so she went to the school building to get a drink. Some younger students recall seeing her on the floor where the 10th grade classrooms were located. However, at night, when the usual call didn't come that evening, her mother grew anxious. Initially dismissing it as a simple delay or a visit to a friend's house, worry soon set in when Tair was nowhere to be found. Her family tried calling her many times on her phone, but she didn't pick up. This made them worry and feel very sad. Ilana's motherly instincts screamed that something was wrong. Without a second thought, she mobilized a search party made up of relatives, friends, acquaintances, and even strangers, all rallying to find Tair. Shemuel, in sheer desperation, joined the search, navigating through the cold, dark streets. The level of distress and panic among Tair's family was palpable. Nobody had seen her since she went into the school earlier, so the police were quickly sent to the school to start looking for her. At around 7 p.m., a group mainly comprising the Rada family's close circle ventured into the school. They searched through the dark hallways and rooms until they got to the girls' restroom for 10th graders. There, they found something unsettling. One of the restroom stalls had its door locked. They saw feet inside, but when they called out, there was a spooky silence, and nobody responded. They used a nearby stall to help them look over, and what they saw was beyond belief. Tair was lying there, not alive, and it was clear that something terrible had happened to her. The walls and floor showed signs of something really scary. She had injuries that were proof of a violent attack, and it was clear that her last moments were filled with fear. The shocking discovery deeply shocked the whole community. Shemuel, who was in a lot of pain, couldn't get close to the crime scene because of how horrifying it was. Tair's brother was so upset that he had to be held back. Everyone in the community was really upset and angry. They couldn't understand how something so terrible could happen in a place where children were supposed to be safe. Parents were worried about their kids' safety and talked about whether it was safe to send them back to school. For a while, the school became a place where a crime had happened, and all the normal classes and activities had to stop. People were confused because the police were searching in a wider area instead of concentrating on the school, which is what the locals thought they would do. The police were talking to people to find out where Tair had last been. 2 people who knew her said they saw her go up the school stairs by herself, without anyone following her. Many students reported being in the restroom around the same time frame as Tair, with several pointing out peculiar occurrences. In the span of 40 minutes, an estimated 10 to 12 girls used the restroom. Yet the police chose to interview only a handful. What struck investigators as particularly odd was how amidst this constant traffic, no one seemed to have witnessed or heard the violent act that took Tair's life. Some students noted anomalies, like the presence of an unfamiliar girl with curly hair. One of Tair's friends, who was confident she knew most of the student body, couldn't recall seeing this girl either before or after that day. Although the mystery girl wore a school shirt, she was perceived as a new student. A specific student claimed to have observed 2 sets of feet in the stall where Tair was later found. Tair's recognizable sneakers and another pair of youth-sized all-stars. She, however, dismissed this observation, attributing a foul odor in the restroom as a reason to leave quickly. Another student, after knocking on the stall's door, was informed it was occupied. The police seemed especially interested in discerning the gender of this voice. Even though she repeatedly mentioned it was a female's voice, she felt the officers were unsatisfied with her response. With the whole community offering their help and sympathy, the Rada family was going through a very sad and difficult time, trying to understand that they had lost Tair. Haim Sadovsky, a private investigator, was really moved by Tair's case, especially because his own daughter was the same age as Tair. He got in touch with the Rada family and offered to use his skills to help them. They were thankful and told him everything they could. Ilana mentioned a peculiar observation. When a group of Tair's friends visited to offer condolences, 2 girls seemed to be having a secretive conversation, prompting Ilana to think they might be withholding crucial information. Haim investigated further, finding numerous inconsistencies in their police statements. Interestingly, one of Tair's classmates went to look for her bag in class, but didn't find it strange that Tair wasn't there. Another classmate mentioned that Tair seemed unusually distant during her favorite class, theater. When her teacher asked what was wrong, Tair's response was really unsettling. "Because I fear death." This made a lot of people wonder if Tair had a feeling that something bad was going to happen to her. When they looked into it more, Tair's friends shared a really disturbing story. They talked about an 18-year-old from Tiberias named Avi who seemed to be fixated on Tair. He kept calling and texting her a lot, and he even made a really scary threat. He said he would harm her if she didn't agree to be in a romantic relationship with him. Avi made Tair even more anxious by insisting on meeting her, and when she said no, he threatened her with harm again. But upon police investigation, there was no evidence to corroborate any interactions between Tair and this supposed stalker, Avi. This brought up an important question. Why would Tair's friends come up with such a story? Could it be a way to distract from something else? Haim Sadovsky, during his investigation, reasoned that the extreme violence inflicted upon Tair didn't seem characteristic of an adult assailant. An adult wouldn't need to exert such brutality to overpower a young girl. He postulated that the culprits were likely 2 individuals, roughly Tair's age and stature. Aside from the 2 girls who were previously suspected, there was another person Tair knew who caught their attention. This girl was similar to Tair in terms of looks and intelligence, but they had a noticeable dislike for each other. Tair had told her mom about her concerns regarding this person at the beginning of the school year. What's interesting is that this girl left town not long after Tair's death, and when the authorities asked her about students leaving town, she avoided giving a straight answer. Despite initial suspicions pointing towards Tair's classmates, the investigation did not yield any DNA, fingerprints, or shoe imprints as evidence. Authorities then shifted their focus to a gardener employed at the school. His presence in the teacher's lounge on the fateful day, combined with his seemingly disoriented demeanor, as noted by the school psychologist, made him a person of interest. But the school's gardener had a strong alibi that made it hard for the police to connect him to the crime. Even though the psychologist's statements seemed believable, the police were stuck with a lot of uncertainties and not enough answers. Then, in a surprising turn of events, The investigation started looking at someone else who looked very much like the school's gardener. This led investigators to believe that the school psychologist could have mistakenly identified the two. Roman Zadorov, a construction worker at the school, found himself under the investigative lens shortly after Tair's murder. A recent immigrant from Ukraine, Zadorov had relocated to Israel 2 years prior and was earning a living through miscellaneous construction jobs. He had met his wife, Olga, back in Ukraine, and the two were high school sweethearts. His family made the move to Israel, where he was then employed as a handyman for a contractor. Due to visa restrictions, Zadorov wasn't legally allowed to work, so he was compensated in cash. At his wife's urging, Zadorov had initiated the process of acquiring Israeli citizenship during the time of his arrest. He wasn't fluent in Hebrew and mostly communicated in Russian. The police's suspicion was aroused when Zadorov revealed that he had discarded the clothes he wore on the day of Tair's murder. During the long hours of his interrogation, while denying any involvement in the crime, investigators scoured his residence. They unearthed pornographic content on his computer, which, upon closer inspection, involved young but legally aged women. Further amplifying suspicion was Zadorov's collection of knives, especially given the nature of Tair's injuries. Zadorov's detention was based on the circumstantial evidence of the knives and the school psychologist's potentially mistaken testimony. Adding to the tension was the media's reporting of unverified information, claims that Zadorov's DNA matched that found at the crime scene. This, however, was not accurate. While DNA samples were indeed sent to the U.S. for testing, the results were pending. The interrogation tactics took a contentious turn. Authorities missiled Zadorov, stating that his DNA was present at the crime scene in an attempt to extract a confession. Although Zadorov initially resisted, he was pressured into thinking the evidence was undeniable. He speculated that perhaps he inadvertently stepped in blood he had noticed in the school's male restroom, thus explaining any potential trace. After this grueling questioning, he was placed in a holding cell, suggesting further developments in the case were imminent. Something surprising happened. Zadorov's cellmate turned out to be working with the police. They promised him a lot of money, and even more if he could get Zadorov to admit to the crime. But Zadorov didn't give in. He kept saying he didn't do it, especially because he had just become a father and didn't want to lose his family. But after more than a week, the informant tried a different approach. He made Zadorov believe that the evidence against him was really strong, and his best chance to get a shorter prison sentence would be to admit to a lesser crime like manslaughter. That way, he might spend less time in jail. Under significant pressure, and with the informant's guidance, Zadorov was led to believe that he might have acted in a fit of uncontrollable rage, a side effect of feeling marginalized as an immigrant in Israel. Zadorov started doubting his own memory, pondering over past incidents where he acted out and later had no recollection of the event. Eventually, he mused, "Maybe I did kill her. If everything points towards me, perhaps I did it." Yet inconsistencies remained. Zadorov recalled working late on the day of Tair's murder and wasn't covered in any blood. His discarded trousers, which had been a point of suspicion, were thrown away due to their uncomfortable fit, not any purported bloodstains. Without Zadorov knowing, his talks in the prison cell were being recorded. Taking advantage of Zadorov's growing uncertainty, the investigators convinced him to act out what happened during the crime at the school, and they recorded everything on video. The authorities thought this was the proof they needed. Later, in a press conference, they said they had caught Tair's killer and suggested that a small argument over cigarettes had made Zadorov react violently. However, Tair's family and friends challenged this narrative. They desired more concrete forensic evidence. They felt in their core that Zadorov wasn't the actual perpetrator. Their skepticism was compounded by the police's claim regarding the cigarette altercation. Tair was known to detest smoking and was unlikely to insult anyone, especially someone older than her. Tair's mother, Tair Rada, was persistent in her belief that the real killer came from Tair's circle of friends. Over the years, she gathered information, growing increasingly convinced that there were unsettling dynamics within Tair's close group of friends leading up to her tragic death. Ilana, while digging deeper into the school's culture, found some disturbing information. She thought that a lot of students might be part of a satanic group, and she started thinking that Tair's death could have been a part of a ritual. As the investigation continued, Roman Zadorov's wife got in touch with their legal team. After they did their own investigation, they came to the conclusion that Zadorov was being blamed for something he didn't do and had been manipulated into confessing. Zadorov quickly recanted his confession, yet remained incarcerated awaiting his trial, which commenced on July 2, 2007. The prosecution's narrative took a dramatic turn. They suggested that traumatic childhood experiences from Ukraine were triggered when Zadorov began working at a school, leading to an explosive reaction when provoked by the students. They also misleadingly stated that DNA evidence tied Zadorov to the crime scene, even though the results from the U.S. had not been received. The defense, however, dismantled the prosecution's claims one by one. Despite the crime scene being dense with various pieces of evidence like blood, hair, and footprints, not a single trace linked Zadorov. His residence was scored extensively, even his washing machine, but yielded no ties to the crime. 3 hairs on Tair's body matched 3 different individuals, none being Zadorov. 60 fingerprints found at the site didn't match him either. Moreover, Zadorov's timeline for the day provided him with a reliable alibi. His whereabouts were confirmed by various people at different times, ensuring he was nowhere near the crime scene during the estimated time of Tair's death. The prosecution relied a lot on Zadorov's confession, even though it had many mistakes. When they reenacted the crime, it didn't match up, and it seemed like the police were telling him what to say. They said Zadorov knew things only the real killer would know, but the defense argued that the investigators actually told him all those exclusive details. When Zadorov was asked to show how certain parts of the crime happened, he kept getting it wrong, and the officers had to help him until his answers matched the evidence. Furthermore, the nature of Tair's injuries suggested they were inflicted by a left-handed individual, while Zadorov was right-handed. The multiple inconsistencies in Zadorov's confession raised significant doubts about its authenticity and the integrity of the investigation. Zadorov's confession had a lot of inconsistencies, and the defense team pointed them out clearly. He said he used a knife with a smooth blade, but the forensic evidence showed that the weapon had a serrated edge. To make things more confusing, during the reenactment of the school, Zadorov took the officers to the wrong restroom. The actual crime scene was easy to spot because there was still crime scene tape there, which was a pretty big mistake. Also, when Zadorov showed how he escaped from the restroom cubicle, it didn't match the evidence at the crime scene. He said he jumped over the cubicle door, but the footprints suggested that the killer climbed over the neighboring cubicle instead. Prosecutors argued that a bloody footprint at the scene matched Zadorov's specific shoe brand. However, this claim lost weight given that no blood was found on his actual shoes. Considering the violent nature of the crime, it seemed improbable that he could be present in the cubicle without his shoes being splattered with blood. Despite these glaring inconsistencies and the lack of concrete evidence linking him to the crime, Zadorov was found guilty and handed a life sentence. The court labeled his statements as deceitful, adding charges of obstructing a police investigation. After the trial, Tair's mother initially believed Zadorov was the perpetrator, swayed by his confession and the supposed footprint evidence. Yet, in the ensuing months, her conviction wavered. Tair Rada soon went public with her distrust in the legal system and voiced suspicions towards students at Tair's school, even suggesting a satanic ritual might be involved. Refusing to accept the verdict, Zadorov's defense team remained undeterred in their pursuit of justice. Further muddying the case's credibility was a scandal involving the presiding judge, who later resigned due to charges of indecent offenses against minors. Public sentiment started to shift towards Zadorov, with many voicing their support for his innocence and demanding justice for Tair. In 2016, A documentary, Shadow of Truth, spotlighted the case and introduced a harrowing confession from an anonymous individual. He recounted a chilling admission from his ex-girlfriend, referred to as AK, who confessed to Tair's murder. This former student of the same high school confessed to wearing the school's uniform, lying in wait, and killing Tair in a ritualistic manner. This confession eerily aligned with earlier police testimonies from a student. Ak's backstory further darkened this narrative. She had a traumatic childhood, which included witnessing extreme violence and being concealed in a wolf's corpse for warmth. These experiences led her to have disturbing fantasies about violence and blood, to the point where she became obsessed with them. After Tair's murder, AK supposedly told her lover all the gruesome details of the crime, even showing them her blood-soaked clothes and the murder weapon. She went into great detail about what she did and what happened afterward, and it strangely matched what investigators had already found. Bringing back these unsettling claims and stories only added to the complexity and uncertainty of the case. In the dark aftermath of Tair's murder, AK stayed close to the lifeless body, hiding until it was safe to leave. She managed to slip away without anyone noticing, changing out of her blood-stained clothes and getting clean ones before making her escape. Once she got home, she cleaned herself up and disappeared from everyone's radar. Roman Zadorov's defense team was eager to probe deeper into the account relayed by AK's ex-boyfriend. They subjected him to 3 lie detector tests, all of which he passed without any signs of deceit. This prompted the police to arrest AK, a striking blonde woman who vehemently denied any involvement in Tair's killing. AK shifted the blame to her former lover, accusing him of both harboring bloody fantasies and physically assaulting her. Things took a really unsettling turn when AK, who was on house arrest, tried to harm her current boyfriend. When he rejected her, an intoxicated AK threatened him with a piece of broken glass. Luckily, people nearby stopped her from carrying out the attack. When the police arrested her, AK suddenly had a scary change of heart and confirmed the horrifying things her ex-boyfriend had told them before. Even though AK was found unfit to go to trial for the attempted murder and was sent to a mental health facility, no formal charges were filed against her. On the other hand, her ex-boyfriend had to deal with charges of obstructing justice and indecent assault while he was in prison. While he was behind bars, the authorities made him a proposition. If he took back what he had said about AK's involvement in Tair's murder, they would drop his charges. He strongly and dramatically refused, even threatening to take his own life, while insisting that AK was responsible for Tair's tragic death. The tragic murder of Tair Rada not only took away a young, promising life, but also shattered the lives of those who loved her. The passing of Shemuel Rada, Tair's father, in January 2016, further added to the family's anguish. During Shemuel's final farewell, Tair Rada's heart-wrenching words, calling Shemuel a king soon to be reunited with his queen, Tair, underlined the depths of her pain. And amidst her own overwhelming grief, she expressed her own yearning to join them. Yet, the story continued to unfold. The discovery of new forensic evidence in 2018 threw a wrench into the case's perceived conclusions. The matching DNA of a hair found on Tair's body to the man who had earlier made revelations about AK muddied the waters even more. It raised pressing questions. Was he the true perpetrator, or had he been speaking the truth throughout? His proximity to AK during the murder, and the fact that criminals often immerse themselves in investigations added layers of complexity. In 2019, Zadorov's attorney Yoram Halevi filed a request with the Supreme Court for a trial, claiming the existence of a lot of new evidence that proves unequivocally that Zadorov did not murder the deceased and could not have murdered the deceased. In a dramatic ruling in perhaps the most famous murder case in Israeli history, Roman Zadorov was acquitted on March 2023 of the 2006 murder of a 13-year-old schoolgirl that horrified the nation, in a retrial that overturned previous convictions that saw him serve more than a decade behind bars after being sentenced to life. The panel of 3 judges at the Nazareth District Court announced a 2-1 decision to exonerate Zadorov, who burst into tears and later said, "The truth triumphed. I am happy. I was confined to my home. Now I will take my children for a stroll." Judges Asher Kula and Danny Sarfati acquitted Zadorov, while the 3rd judge, Tamer Nissim Shai, ruled that he was guilty. The verdict is some 700 pages long. A representative of the state prosecutors in the case said her team would study the verdict and then decide whether to appeal the acquittal to the Supreme Court. At the end of the verdict reading, Judge Kula turned to Ilana Rada, the victim's mother. "We tried to solve the mystery, but it is possible that Tair took her secret to the grave," he said. Ilana Rada answered, "At last, after 16 years of lies, justice was served. The war is just beginning. This is a cover-up by the prosecution. The prosecutors of the State of Israel." The case of Jessica Gutierrez. Jessica Gutierrez, warmly known as Jessie by her family, was born on December 3, 1981, in the United States. She was the youngest amongst her 3 siblings. The family lived in a modest mobile home located in the rural area of South Carolina. In 1983, the tranquility was disrupted when Jessica's parents divorced. The children were left in the full custody of their mother, Deborah, while David Gutierrez, their father, moved to Mexico, maintaining a transient lifestyle between there and California. Following the divorce, Deborah worked diligently, finding employment at the United States Postal Service to meet the needs of her family, ensuring their well-being despite the challenges of raising 4 children alone. In June of 1986, Deborah found herself entangled with a man whose behavior grew progressively controlling and problematic, exacerbated by his increasing alcohol consumption. Eventually, his behavior reached a tipping point, leading to his expulsion from Deborah's life and home. However, Deborah's hope for respite was short-lived as her life plunged into further darkness. On June 5, 1986, a seemingly typical early summer day unfolded in South Carolina. The weather was pleasant, with temperatures hovering around 30 degrees Celsius, clouds ornamenting the sky. The family spent their day indulging in outdoor activities and nurturing familial bonds. The day concluded with Deborah preparing sandwiches for dinner and painting Jessica's nails before the children were put to bed. Jessica, maintaining her usual habits, requested to sleep in her mother's bed, a request granted by Deborah. However, when her elder brother experienced discomfort and pain later in the night, Deborah allowed him to sleep in her bed, relocating Jessica to the room at the hallway's end beside her sister, Becky. The following morning, Deborah awoke to a scene of subtle chaos, marking the inception of her ordeal. The front door was ajar, the family dog wandering restlessly, and a set of curtains lay on the floor, with the mosquito net appearing to be forcibly removed. Jessica was missing. Her absence was accentuated by Becky's ominous statement attributing her disappearance to a man with a magic hat and beard. A state of panic ensued as Deborah combed through every conceivable hiding spot, hoping to find Jessica playing hide and seek. Her efforts were futile, leading her to frantically search the surroundings of her home, eventually reporting Jessica missing at 9 a.m. The ensuing investigations by the Lexington County Sheriff's Department revealed no signs of a struggle nor any missing items from the house, apart from the papers scattered on the bedroom floor. The conjectures pointed to a potential kidnapper entering through the back window, abducting Jessica without waking her, and exiting through the front door. Search operations extended to the neighboring woods and abandoned structures in the predominantly rural area of Red Bank, especially rural back in 1986. The speculations, searches, and Becky's consistent statement about the man with the magic hat continued to haunt the family, embodying the relentless pursuit of truth and justice in the light of such grim circumstances. They searched many woods and areas with small streams and ponds for Jessica. Searches were made using off-road vehicles across large areas filled with nature. The sheriff's department sent a plane to fly over the area, hoping to find some trace of the girl, but none of the searches were successful. Deborah was taken to the sheriff's department to answer questions about what happened in the last 24 hours. She insisted she didn't know what happened to Jessica, but was sure about who did it. She blamed her ex-boyfriend for taking Jessica, but he said he didn't know where she was. The police also looked into Jessica's father, who was in California at the time. No charges were made against them. On June 7, the FBI and South Carolina law enforcement joined the search. Bulletins were sent nationwide. This was 10 years before the Amber Alert system and way before the internet era, so communication between departments could be slow and cumbersome. The sheriff's department tapped Deborah's phone to monitor all incoming and outgoing calls in case someone called with ransom demands. The police told reporters they believed Jessica was taken from the mobile home and didn't walk away on her own. Weeks into the investigation, the detectives only had one physical clue found at the home. A fresh fingerprint was found on the open window at the back of the house, believed to be the point of entry on June 5. The fingerprint was sent to the FBI, but no matches were found. In September 1986, the sheriff in charge announced they had a suspect but didn't have enough proof to charge him. The suspect had failed a polygraph test, but since those aren't admissible in court, it wasn't enough for an arrest. After this, there were few glimmers of hope in the following years. In 1987, police in Kansas contacted the Lexington County Sheriff's Department, saying they had a girl matching Jessica's description. Deborah flew to Kansas hoping to see her daughter, but it wasn't Jessica. Deborah returned to South Carolina, determined to keep Jessica's case alive. She and the sheriff often disagreed about the case and argued over the investigation. Deborah decided to conduct her own investigation and keep Jessica's case in the public eye. In June 1989, Deborah told the state newspaper she had found fibers in an abandoned car connected to a family friend serving time in North Carolina for assault. This was a major revelation. 2 years earlier, Deborah had received a letter from an inmate in North Carolina claiming his cellmate had confessed to abducting and killing a 4-year-old child in 1986. The cellmate, Thomas McDowell, was a registered sex offender living in Lexington County at the time of Jessica's disappearance and was known to the Gutierrez family. Thomas claimed he had killed Jessica because she recognized him and said he had thrown her body into a landfill. Thomas also said he had a beard and was wearing a tall cowboy hat at the time of the abduction. Thomas' cellmate not only informed Deborah but also contacted the police with this information. This led investigators to extensively interrogate Thomas, who agreed to disclose every detail about the crime to the detectives. However, he demanded immunity in exchange. Of course, it wasn't a deal the state was willing to make, so he remained in prison in North Carolina, and Jessica's case officially went unresolved. Deborah felt frustrated and angry. In 1989, she told the state newspaper that it felt like they had no rights and that the system wasn't working for the victims. She was particularly upset that no charges were brought against Thomas. After all, he had confessed, and his version matched the events of June 5. But there was something even more surprising. Thomas's fingerprints were taken and found to match the fingerprint found on the Gutierrez family house window. In 2007, 21 years after Jessica's disappearance, Deborah publicly criticized a Lexington County Sheriff's Department and accused them of mishandling her daughter's case. She said that for years she had been afraid of what would happen if she dared to contradict the sheriff, a powerful figure in South Carolina. But after 2 decades, she wanted the case to move forward and knew she needed media attention to achieve it. Local news had access to a recorded telephone call between Deborah and the sheriff in June 1986, just a few days after Jessica's disappearance. In the call, recorded by the Sheriff's Department's wiretapping unit, Deborah argued with him about the case, concerned and demanding answers as he was pulling investigators off the search. The sheriff replied that he would give answers when he had them, and then threatened to pull all his agents off the case and send them home if she interfered with him. Of course, Deborah was angered by the sheriff's response, viewing it as a threat to her daughter's case. She asked him what the people who elected him would think if he abandoned Jessica, and he responded that they could elect him or not because he didn't really care what they did. In 2007, when the call transcript was made public, the sheriff said he remembered that Deborah had accused him of favoritism and not handling the case properly, and it had hurt his feelings. Deborah also expressed her frustration with prosecutor, indicating that she had been trying for years to get other agencies to take over the case, but he had not allowed it. The case was even reviewed by the prosecutor in 2007, but no action was taken to charge or prosecute any suspects. When consulted about it, he stated that most of the evidence was inadmissible, and the little that could serve had an explanation and a reasonable doubt. He also said that without a body, the state would need much more evidence to secure a conviction. After this, the case fell back into obscurity, but its main protagonists were generating their own headlines. In 2014, Sheriff James Metz was charged in federal court with 10 counts of bribery and wire fraud, for which he was sentenced to 12 months in prison. In 2016, prosecutor Donnie Myers was arrested for driving under the influence after crashing his car into a utility pole and abandoning the vehicle. He was fined $1,000 and retired from public service in 2017. In 2021, 35 years later, the case sparked renewed interest. Sheriff Jacob, who was elected to office after James went to prison, announced that the county would collaborate with the FBI's Child Abduction Rapid Deployment Team to take a new look at Jessica's disappearance. In January 2022, finally, there was a breakthrough in the case. Police arrested 61-year-old Thomas Eric McDowell in connection with Jessica's disappearance. The subject, whom the child's mother had always suspected, was considered a person of interest in the case but was never followed up on. He resided in Lexington County in 1986. He was arrested at his home and confined to the county detention center. After the arrest, Thomas was charged with murder, kidnapping, and first-degree burglary for the disappearance and death of Jessica Gutierrez. Based on the arrest warrant media outlets have accessed, authorities identified a fingerprint of the suspect at the victim's house. However, it was not disclosed where the fingerprint was found or when it was identified as belonging to Thomas. Regardless, Deborah was aware of the existence of this fingerprint for years, and it was discovered on a window. For her, this was conclusive proof that he committed the crime, as she cleaned her windows every night, and only Jessica's kidnapper would have touched the glass afterward. In the same arrest warrant mentioned, authorities stated that the man was later identified in a photo lineup, and they also had evidence against him that he had told others he had kidnapped and killed the girl. After revisiting the case in 2021, special agents from the FBI and state prosecutors visited the area. Law enforcement agents from South Carolina assisted in interviewing over 125 people. The investigation was extensive, with over 3,500 pages of records reviewed, and 10 FBI field offices were involved in reviewing Jessica's case. The official statement indicated that the arrest was made possible thanks to many years of dedicated investigative work by local, state, and federal partners, as well as the determination of citizens who never forgot Jessica. Jessica's body has never been found, but perhaps this time, the subject will cooperate with authorities about the facts and disclose the location of the little girl. Deborah Gutierrez is still alive, but the long years waiting for answers have taken a toll on her. Her mental health has been affected by her daughter's disappearance, and this time it was Jessica's sister who spoke on her behalf after learning about the suspect's arrest. She said that her family never thought this day would come. She added that her mother fought tirelessly for 36 years for justice for Jessica, praying not only for a conviction, but also for the death penalty. She expressed gratitude on behalf of her family to everyone involved in the arrest of the man whom she described as an evil monster. Paradoxically, Thomas's neighbors considered him a quiet and reserved person who transported his work materials in a van and didn't seem to be a violent individual. Unfortunately, they will have to wait until the trial to find more answers. Apparently, Thomas has not admitted to the crime and has not disclosed what he did to Jessica. And that's the case for today. As always, I appreciate your support for my work. If you subscribe, like, and share this video, it will help me continue creating content. See you in the next episode of Unreal True Crime. See you soon.